What's it like to get to that point where nothing makes you tense anymore?
It's called age.
Mm, that sounds freeing.
Have we started?
Well,
Yeah.
it's an informal start.
All right.
I was told by someone you shouldn't have a start and you shouldn't have an end.
Yeah, you should come in late and end early,
Yeah.
is the old saying. So you don't have to say like, "Hi, I'm John." Like my next guest is.
No.
Okay, good.
I'll do like a pre-roll at the beginning.
Right.
I'll figure it out. That's the thing. I'm figuring all this shit out as I'm going.
That's so great. I love that.
And I love.
There's a real energy to that too.
Yeah, but I catch myself when we talk about this outside. I catch myself of like I'm supposed to have figured things out at the figure it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I think if you're not being embarrassed on some level, you're not doing it correctly. I mean, you have to feel like you're on the edge of disaster, I think.
Oh God.
And be comfortable with that.
Okay.
Because, you're going to mess up and that's fine.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, in the age of AI, I think the human fallibility and authenticity is going to be the thing that really stands out. It's the thing that people are going to want to connect with much more than like the weird uncanny valley of like AI generated imagery and film.
And the human thing is that we fuck up and we feel embarrassed and we get sweaty and nervous and
yeah. I mean, what's interesting is I remember reading a long time ago that part of the reason people obsessively listen to jazz or listen to like the Rolling Stones on vinyl back in the 60s is that they were listening for the mistakes. And the mistakes actually are the things that gave it real power. So Keith Richards, being a little bit off on his guitar work, or Charlie Watts being a little bit off on the beat, not that they were really very off, was enough to where it gave the human element, because it wasn't the typical metronomic kind of beat, clinical kind of sound that you would get from a machine, but it was the fact that a human being had hesitancy, much like we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
AI could totally make a fake version of you and I talking, but there'd be something kind of, parroting of the actual transfer of information, which I think, to get a little bit, woo-woo, is that there's an actual vibrational connection that we're having as we're talking.
Yeah.
Because we're literally making vibrational sounds with our mouths, and if you go far enough down into, the subatomic part of your body in the quantum arena, you're literally vibrational strings, string theory. So I don't know if it goes all the way down to that, but I think that there's definitely a feeling of vibration that we have as human beings and animals and plants.
Totally.
That currently machines do not have.
Well, it's funny you say that because vinyl, obviously with live music, there's a trumpet player in the room, we would receive the frequentional, I was going to make up a word.
That's a good word.
The frequencies of that music. Same with vinyl, is that it still has the frequencies of the music. And there's everyone, I say everyone, binaural beats, music that has a frequency, has a lot of healing properties.
Yes.
And what I learned that when you're on Spotify or Apple, anything digitized, there's no frequency. It's been totally removed from the healing properties. So the automation of it has taken away the magic of it.
Yeah. It's the same thing with painting. So, I do digital work all the time. But the thing about painting is that I believe that there's an actual transference, so to speak, of myself into the paint as I'm making it. In the same way that when you are recording an album, the vibration of your guitar and your voice is being caught as sound waves into vinyl. And I think the same thing for me happens when I'm painting, that a transference of the state that I'm in is captured as a record in a painting. And there was a famous teacher / artist named Robert Henry, Robert Henry, probably originally Robert Henri, but he went by the American pronunciation. And he talked about the fact that a brushstroke captures your state of mind at the time that you're making that brushstroke. So if you're tentative, then it's a tentative stroke. If you're confident, it's a confident stroke. So literally the paint is not only recording an image of a flower or whatever you're doing, but it's capturing the actual state that you're in at the time of making it. So that's why it's interesting to me that, painting or, any kind of artwork which actually captures that frequency is much more powerful than something that's going to be made just through an algorithm.
It's funny you say that because I'm in the middle of recording music right now. And the first couple of days we were trying to record to clip and tempo and do one track and then layer over the top. And every time it just felt like it was losing me.
Yes.
To the point where we kind of agreed, like, I am offbeat, I'm off key. There's some notes that come out and they're like, oh, but actually they're all, and I'm having this process at the moment with music where I want to record it imperfectly.
Yes.
And capture the whatever it is going on in that moment.
Totally. And
that feels like I love kind of art of creative rebellion. It does feel like a rebellious thing to want the real. And we say that we want the real, and yet we're in this world of AI. And I love the conversation we're having out there about how technology and AI is a tool, and it's right relationship.
Yes.
Rather than outsourcing our creativity to technology, but we can still use it.
Yes. The danger is the outsourcing of creativity to the machine, because the value of creativity is not just the output, it's actually what it does to you as a human being, going through the struggle of writing, going through the struggle of singing, going through the struggle of making a painting or a sculpture. That is the value. And I often say that the painting is an artifact of the experience of going through the creative process. So in other words, it's a recording, it's a memory. So that when I look at the painting, I'm like, oh yeah, I did that thing, which led to that creation. But the actual art was the actual making of the thing, not the thing in itself.
Journey's the destination. It's journey, not the destination.
Right. And then, it's great. You have a painting at the end of it. But I think people get stuck on the idea that I have to make a great painting, I have to make a great film, and they're missing being present with the actual gift of creativity, which is being fully immersed in the moment. And when you outsource that creativity to AI or the machine, then you're missing out on personal development. You're missing out on what it means to be human. Now, that being said, I'm actually studying AI and I'm actually working with it, but I'm using it as a tool, as a way to perhaps pre-visualize something, or using it as a way to add an accent to something. But I don't want to just give it away to that, because otherwise it just becomes, I think we're in that early stage now with AI that we were with Photoshop when it first came out. And everybody goes, oh, I'm a designer now. And they're just making really bad Photoshop meme type of things.
Yeah.
And then eventually that kind of just calms down and it gets down to people who can actually use it properly. And I think that ultimately humans are going to be able to tell, at least for the short term, when something has been completely outsourced to AI. Now, eventually that might just get to be seamless, but then it kind of takes the whole point of creativity out of creativity, because then you're just now a recipient. The thing about creativity is it allows you to be an active participant in the creation of something. And then when I make something that I've created and then you view it or read it, we're having an exchange. Or when you're on stage, performing one of your songs, there's an exchange of energy between you're providing the music, they're providing an energy back to you, right? I would imagine, I'm not a musician, but I would imagine that's the...
You are kind of like you're an artist in many disciplines. And
well, there's a music and musicality to writing a book.
Yeah.
So whether we're talking about nonfiction like The Art of Creative Rebellion, where I actually did a series of paintings to interject into the book and to break up the feeling of like too many word blocks and then making words bigger, that's all rhythmical. And in the novel that I'm currently in the final stages of, I look at it and it's the same thing that I don't think AI can do at this point, is that I will have blocks of really dense text, and then I'll have like dialogue, and then I'll have areas where very minimal text. And then that is like the space within a song. That's the rhythm of the song. And that has to come from me, not like a click track going through the book. It has to be like, okay, I'm stopping, I'm speeding up, I'm moving something forward. And that's completely just an intuition.
Yeah, and I think about just the output of ChatGPT, there's no pause, it's just all one way. It's all information output. Whereas this creative process, there's a cycle to it. There's a death cycle, which is like, as you say. And then when you say it's all about the struggle, I don't want to hear that. I want to be like, yeah, but I want to make the music and I want to make this business and I want to have all the things that I'm told that I need to be at that place where I'm going to be happy. And yet I also know and I trust that it is that process that if I can find peace in even doing this podcast or podcast, whatever this thing is, I'm not really sure what the end result is going to be. I have a pretty good idea because I've got these fancy cameras. But in terms of the doubt that comes up in what am I doing, because I don't know what the end result is going to look like. Right. I feel like there's that on steroids for everyone at the moment. They're just like, what the hell are we doing? And maybe it's always been that way.
It has. And at the same time, what you're doing is you're bringing something into existence that did not exist before. And I think that no one really knows what they're doing. You know, you have a general idea, like if I'm writing a book, I kind of think it's about this. But when I start doing it, if a character starts going off the rails somewhere else, I'm going to let them do that. And I think one of the things I was talking to some people the other day, and I said, you know, the important thing to me is that the one thing you can control is creative output. What you create is something you can control. How it's going to be received externally, you know, by the audience, by society, you can't control that. All you can do is make something. So I really encourage people to create every day anything. It doesn't have to be like a painting. It doesn't have to be poetry. It doesn't have to be dance. It can be, I'm learning a language. But actively engaging yourself into something which creates, I think, automatically brings you more energy. The opposite of that is consumption only. So social media, the reason why it's broken down a lot of our, you know, focus and our ability to think deeply is that it's just a constant, like 3 seconds, switch. But the worst thing about it is that you are only receiving information. You're not actually creating information. So for example, what I mean is like you read a book, you are actually actively making images in your head, whether you realize it or not. You're hearing voices. Your brain is activated in a way that it's not when you're looking at small snippets of content on the phone. When you are listening to music actively, like at a concert, you are listening with your entire being, you know, if it's good, you know, and you're completely engaged. Even if you're watching TV for an hour or a movie for 2 hours, you are focused for a period of time. The problem now is that we are in a state where we're just getting small stimulants, you know, dopamine releases, which, you know, ADHD used to be a relatively unusual thing, and now it's an epidemic because it's induced through technology. So I think the trick is more and more is like, how do you learn how to focus and go deep? And again, drawing will do that. Writing a song will do that. Learning a language will do that. You automatically get into a contemplative state. And I think that's going to be required more and more as we go forward. And I'm heartened to see that young people are reading a lot more. You know, it's a thing that people think, well, they have ADHD, they can't. But actually, ADHD is not just like I have a short-term attention span. They have very deep focus too. So they can actually sit down and read books. They can actually focus. ADHD is basically your brain looking for stimulation. And the moment it gets bored, it immediately goes, looks over there, looks over there, looks over there. But if you can capture someone completely through music and art and writing, then, you know, they can actually go deep.
I find that reassuring because I just assume that we're on this jump off cliff point of just attention span and long form content and all that stuff is just done, you know? Yeah.
Well, I think it's easy for humans to catastrophize. You know, we are built to look for danger. So I think the trick is, not to get all like, oh, you should be writing gratitude journals every day, but if you
should be writing gratitude.
Well, you probably should.
I'm also going to move the mic a little. Do you mind moving it to either down or putting it to your,
There?
Yeah.
Am I getting
You're getting caught on it.
Yeah. So
Sorry to cut you off.
No, I'm hoping that.
No, it's going to be good. It's fine.
But the idea is that when you're in a state of fear, which the current world is, you know, imagine being in your early 20s, you have a crazy government situation, wars across the world. You have climate change. You have a situation where AI and new technology is going to wipe out most entry-level jobs for young people within the next 1 to 5 years. You're in a state of abject fear and uncertainty in a way that none of us growing up, or my parents or their parents, ever had. So the only thing you can do is have fearlessness and to embrace courage. Because if you don't, fear will actually reduce your cognitive ability to think expansively, and you won't see solutions when they're put right in front of you. But if you do the opposite and you open yourself up and you feel the fear, you feel the concern, but then you acknowledge it and let it go, and then you continue to expand yourself, then you'll see opportunities because they've probably always been there, but you haven't seen them. And I think if you can do that, reframe it as a interesting, curious thing to be curious about versus going, oh shit, I can't deal with that. Because the moment you push it to the side, it's just going to come after you. So one of the things that I try to teach or mentor, younger people is, look at any kind of obstacle as something that can be creatively solved. But in order to creatively solve it, you have to get into a state where your nervous system is not just like freaked out and tight.
Which is the conversation I was having earlier, was all about the nervous system being in that state of fear.
Yeah.
And it's just, and what do you find has helped with that process?
Well, essentially, my wife, Sage, has been telling me for a long time that the key to everything is your nervous system. And for me, I have to actively meditate and work out in order to teach my body that it's okay. And what I do as soon as I wake up in the morning is I try to right mind myself. So if I'm waking up in anxiety, or I'm waking up with some ache in my body, which is clearly from worry, like a tightness in my shoulder or my stomach, I try to go into it and I try to let that go, try to reframe how I'm thinking about the world. Then I go and meditate. And then after meditating, I usually work out. I study, well, in my case, I study Japanese for about an hour, and then I go to work on my things. But I think it's important, I think, that you need to keep a certain kind of structure in your life. Because so many people, will say, I want to be a musician or an artist, and all it really requires is that every day you show up to a thing that you're doing. And showing up to do a thing every day at the same time, or approximately whatever time works for you, also makes you so much better at that thing. You can't help but get better. And if you keep doing that long enough, even if you show up and you feel like you had a bad day of making music or even working out or what have you, just the very fact that you have shown up will automatically give you incremental value that will composite over time. The worst thing you can do is you go, I want to write a book. Then you go in and you sit down and you have all this pressure on yourself and you try to do something and it's terrible and you give up. Whereas if you go and say, well, I'm just going to write every day for 30 minutes, no matter what, whatever comes into my head, I'm doing that. Then eventually you'll have a body of work that you can then edit down to whatever it is you're really trying to write about. So quantity begets quality, but you have to be, I don't use the word discipline, but you have to be in a practice.
You make it sound so easy.
No, it's not.
Cool. Yeah.
It's not easy.
Make it sound simple.
It's simple. We wake up and we go, oh, I'm tired, or I have a cold, or I have, my stomach hurts. Any number of reasons, the dishwasher's on the fritz, money concerns, whatever the case is.
Yeah.
Anything that you really want to do, ironically, will be immediately met with resistance. And you will find every other reason not to do it. And I don't know why we do that, because we love to create. But I think it was Stephen Pressfield who wrote The War of Art.
Yeah.
And he talked about the resistance. It's a commonly well-known thing, especially from his books. But the idea that there's an immediate block that comes up for us whenever we're trying to create. And I think it's because we're exposing ourselves.
So when you say that, so I did breathwork this morning at Open, and the person talking through it always says, in the first 5-10 minutes, you're going to have resistance. And I do every single time. It's just like, words, stop. But then you get into the rhythm and it's, by the end, you're like, oh, bring in that oxygen and it's so good. But the first, 10 minutes of it, I don't want to be doing it. I'm like, why the fuck did I do that? Same with like swimming.
Yeah.
That getting up in the morning and saying, I'm going to go swimming. I don't think I've ever had the days where I actually end up in the pool. The journey of, that 20 minutes was the most resistance of like putting on my swimsuit to actually getting into that place.
Well, that's the reason why getting into a practice, it becomes like brushing your teeth. You don't think about it. It's the thinking that stops you from doing something. And then the second thing is if you can do something with community, like if you can do breath work with a group, that's so much better.
Yeah.
And if you are a writer, it's helpful if you are friends with other writers who can actually then hold you to account. Like, I know I haven't done this myself, so I'm a little bit hypocritical, but if you can have a writing buddy and you meet every week and you're actually able to read each other's work and give actual good feedback to each other, that usually helps the journey. Otherwise, I think that a lot of creativity is also isolating,
Yeah, I mean, I personally just get filled with so much self-doubt in what am I doing? I get inspired.
Yes.
I definitely am not short with inspiration, but the execution of it and then the sustaining that is where I just like, who do I think I am? Like, even as I say, even the series, like I've had these moments of like, what do I think I'm doing? And you've been part of the whole collective thing from day one. I love sharing this story because so I was a hippie on the road for a couple of years and I had your book, The Art of Creative Rebellion. I bought it at TLC, so it must have just come out pretty early on. And it was the book that I was solo, so I would go into cafes and I would read the book and I'd be like, oh my God. And it seemed at the time because I was just coming out, I've just been in the corporate world my entire life. So I wasn't around people having these conversations, this idea of having a creative life and tapping into it is higher philosophies of life.
Yeah.
But also talking about paying the bills. And when I came back to LA and these conversations started to happen, I was like, I want to have an event. And I harassed you. I love this story. Harassed you on all platforms. And JC said, maybe we should go meet Harley. And so you've seen it from the start. And even in just the space of 2 years. 2 years. That was 2023, right?
I don't know, maybe earlier.
I think it was.
I'm trying to remember. I think it's 23, yeah.
But these series of events have happened, which for me have been very creatively inspired. Of like, here's an event with you and Dasu, and then James Blake. Oh my God! And then Substack, and then more events, and then we had another one last year, and now we're doing this series, and I'm following this breadcrumb trail, and at the same time, to the point that you made at the beginning of embarrassing and wanting to die inside. Like, I've been wanting to die inside the entire time. And yet it still keeps coming,
Yeah.
And so I love kind of how you talk about this idea of, I think it is that intersection of how do you live this creative life, because we're all creatives but still pay the bills.
Yeah, that's the big question. So number one, I salute you. You're being very courageous. And
insane, but thank you.
No, it's really good. The difficulty I find is that most people will go, I need stability, especially right now because the economy is like, we're up and down. And so they immediately go and they work for a large company, understandably. I get paid every 2 weeks. I get health insurance, which in this country is extremely expensive. And that's fine. I'm making a bit of a generalization here, but from my experience of working in corporate environments is that people can't bring their whole self to the job, because you were hired for a role within this, large machine, and you were being paid to fulfill that role. And I understand that logically, but when I was managing creatives, designers, when I was at Hulu, what I would do is I would get to the final stage of an interview with a candidate, and they would come to me, and I would realize by that point they've already been vetted. They can do the thing they're being hired to do, like a mobile designer or a web designer or a platform designer. So at this point, what I'm trying to do is find out what else can they do. And the reason why is I'm not trying to exploit their other capabilities. I know they're dying to do that. They want to express their other abilities. And if I can find a way where they're doing the thing that the company needs them to do, but I can Venn diagram that into something that they're really quite good at, then I can actually get 2 or 3x the value out of that person. And then they feel 10x the value because they're actually enjoying coming to work to do not only the thing they've been hired to do, but another thing that could actually be close to it tangentially, and then actually might even pull them into a different direction. So, I mean, as a very banal example, I had my last executive assistant when I was at Hulu. She was my EA, but she told me, she goes, I really want to be a designer. So as part of her day, I had her work with designers within the group, and she would shadow them and she'd work with them. And then over time, she actually became a designer. And I, my thinking is that for me personally, there are professional EAs and that's what they want to do. But I have often gotten EAs who don't. They're looking at it as a way in, they're looking at it as a way to get to the next thing. And as a human, I want people to develop themselves.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because I always say that, it's funny you say that. It's not funny. It's never funny. But this idea that what would companies look like if every single one had that approach?
Yeah.
Because I think there's something like, I was actually speaking to Josh about this, about the value that's lost in employees of not doing the thing that they're very good at.
Yes.
And I think, we get to this point, I got to this point where I needed to exit my company because I couldn't do that anymore because I was dying inside. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it has to look like that for everyone. No. And but what does it look like in this new world where if companies were allowing individuals to bring a lot more of their self, they could still have the stability, but they are much more fulfilled creatively and in terms of what they actually wanted to contribute. Not only does the individual benefit, as you say, but the company does. And so I'm convinced this whole HR people mentality has been designed to stop companies from being sued, basically, being protected. But what would it look like if that whole function was, and it doesn't even have to be that function, but what would it look like if managers knew how to get the best out of their employees in that sense?
Right.
So that employees didn't feel like they had to quit or leave or whatever. Maybe they do, or maybe it's a 4-day-a-week thing and they have the hobby on the side or whatever.
Right. I think part of the problem with most companies is that humans, by their very nature, are controlling. And they control out of fear. And they control, like, let's say a bad manager has employees that they feel that they have to tell them everything that they need to do. So they don't trust them at all to do the thing that they were hired to do. Instead, because of self-preservation and fear of bad reflection, and therefore fear of being, if you go back to it, exiled, in other words, fired or laid off, they will do everything possible to mitigate that risk by doing what they think is right, which is to control people. The irony, of course, is if you simply make a culture and an environment which allows people to roam freely within, let's say, the parameters, you definitely say, well, here's the boundaries of the thing we're doing, but allow them to have that, then you're going to get so much more value from a business perspective as well as a human perspective. But as a leader, you have to be able to mitigate your own ego and not be worried about managing upwards or downwards, but just be a good person and be quite good at what you do. You don't have to be excellent. You guys just have to be competent, but really, really competent at what you do.
Why do you think people struggle with that so much?
I don't know. I think it's because we care way too much about what other people think.
Yeah.
And again, that's why I go back to that theory that just make good stuff. Just produce good stuff, whatever that is. And if you do that, that work literally will work, will speak for you. But I think a lot of people in corporate environments are very busy. Like they spend their whole day being very busy. But if you ask them at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, what did you get done? They will go, I don't know. I was just in meetings. I was busy making presentations. I was presenting those presentations. I was doing emails to follow up on the presentation that I made to see if we actually came to a conclusion, which I'm not sure we did. So we're gonna have to have another meeting, and I'm making a presentation for that meeting, and so this becomes this really weird cycle where you are spending a lot of time not making decisions, but actually making more meetings to think about the thing. So,
I feel like, I think I just mentioned this outside, but just this feeling of walking into this place, Lighthouse, where they have such an emphasis on creativity.
Yeah.
And in other places I've worked, in LA, won't name them, but when you walk in and people look up to see who's just walked in.
Yeah.
There's like a who's who. It's a very...
Any restaurant.
It's like, go walk out of there.
Yeah.
It's very sceney places in Venice, LA, wherever. And there was a distinct difference about walking in here, which I didn't feel that. It didn't feel sceney, although there's a bunch of really cool people here.
Yeah.
And I realized, or at least what I think is because everybody is full of creators. It's people who are so focused on what they're building and doing and creating that there isn't this interest around what other people
because they're making,
yeah,
right? They're makers.
Yeah.
And I think that is an amazing thing that's going on right now. On one level, it's kind of tragic what's happening with the LA industry. Sorry, it's tragic what's happening with the LA industry. I think a lot of this can be solved, speaking about Hollywood, with tax incentives. Because currently people are shooting internationally or shooting in other states because LA is too expensive. But, we're in an environment right now where Warner Brothers has just been downgraded to junk status. And what you're seeing is the rise of the creator economy. I mean, it's been there for a while, but it's truly happening. And what you're seeing here within this organization is the ability for people who are happy because they're creating and are building their own audience. There's plenty of people in the world to build an audience where you can be successful. Downright wealthy if you do it correctly. But you don't need the intermediary of these large studios anymore. You need a studio, depending on how you're shooting, but with new tools, again, with technology, AI, a direct relationship, then you're seeing a huge shift happening. I mean, I didn't know YouTube would become such a huge player, because coming from large companies like, Hulu, and having worked with, large streamers, I thought that YouTube would always be kind of in the, UGC kind of world, and that premium content would always be the winner. And that was true for a long time. And now, because the quality of the creator economy, because of places like this, is so high that they can now compete with the major studios. So I think the bad news is that the old structure of major studios is going to be fraying pretty badly. I mean, I don't think it's ever going to go away completely, but I think it's just definitely going through a very rough patch. But I think the great thing is that smaller studios, this is basically a studio space, are going to allow more voices, more diverse voices, more interesting voices to come to the fore.
Well, I think about, there's the level of sovereignty, but also there's the level of, this is so Aquarian age, which is like power to the people, decentralized economies. Depending how woo you want it, yeah. But I think about what Jesh is doing, and he's building a version of artificial intelligence, which is, what's the word? Wow, escapes my brain. More not appropriate, but rather than just like the internet just being 5 people, white guys up in San Francisco. It's
the internet of minds of people.
And like that's what's happening with creatives and like what we're experiencing here, which is individuals who are creating their own brand. I think that's the thing, like we even talk about it with yourself, like and me with what we're doing, which is how individuals have become the brands these days.
Yeah, and I think what Jesh is doing is radical, not because of the technology, but because of the thinking around it. Instead of like a typical like data center that's just trawling everything from Reddit to Twitter and getting information and misinformation as part of the database that ChatGPT and all the others are using, what he's doing is saying, here's your garden, here's your bespoke AI agent that is essentially going to be a doppelganger of you, as you know, and you feed it clean information. And not only that, it's getting information that can't be captured through Wikipedia. It's getting information about your life, your existence, your emotional experiences. All that is being captured. And what I think is beautiful about this is once it's captured, then even though it's not a transference of my consciousness, but what it is a replica of that, so that my great-great-great-granddaughter can actually talk to grandpa, at some point after I'm long gone.
I think there's so many reasons to be so fearful about all the ways that you just described earlier, what's happening in the world, economic crisis, mental health crisis, political shit show, all the stuff, environmental, everything's dying. And yet at the same time, I'm surrounded by so much good stuff happening. And I feel very inspired. I feel very inspired that, the solution will always be in art and creativity and new ideas coming out of people.
Yeah, I think you have to be careful what information you consume, because it's going to be primarily geared towards negativity. That's how people sell stuff, But I think it's important too that, as I've gone through my life journey, I'm trying to find friends who are...
Sorry, I was going to make a joke. And I'm trying to find friends.
Trying to make friends?
Okay.
Yes. But I'm trying to make friends who are actually vibrating at a higher level of consciousness and aspiration. Because you've been around people who are just like, oh, my back hurts, everything's wrong, I can't get a job, whatever. Like, it's just a constant complaint. And that what it does is it puts you into a victim mode, where essentially what you're saying is somebody do something for me versus me doing something, right? Whereas if you're around people who are trying, and maybe failing, but still trying, you need to find people who are aspiring, who are optimistic, who are open. And your 5 closest friends are often a reflection of you, as they say, right? So find those people, find your tribe, because when you are feeling down, they're the ones who are going to help you, and vice versa. And this is where I think community is very important. And I'm terrible at community myself, but I do think it's extremely important to find your people, find your tribe. And you got to find people who are truly supportive of you, or not on some level competing with you, or even subconsciously, they might even be sabotaging you.
Yeah, and I was having this conversation with someone recently, especially, and I know it will exist the same for guys as well, but this was actually in regards to a friend's birthday the other day, where there was a very attractive man, one, and then there was a whole group of women. And there wasn't, it was reflecting on it because it wasn't, I think about that scenario, how that would have been like 5-6 years ago with maybe different people in that. It would have been very competitive and very peacocky or whatever. It's this idea of competition. And I don't have that as much in my life anymore. There isn't this sense of competition with my friends, or because it's not this idea of lack, but it's, this idea that there isn't enough. I feel like it's so ingrained into us that there isn't enough. Like, I have a disease of enough. Like, I haven't done enough. There isn't enough. What's my other one? I am not enough. And so I constantly have to remember that if I'm creating, to your point around like that being the medicine and that being the solution for it, there's always more.
Oh yeah. There's an infinite amount of resources, really. But you're right. We're brought up with the idea of lack, that, there's only so much money around, which is not true. That the idea that in order for me to win, you must lose, when in fact it should be like, in order for me to win, you should win. There should be a way of communing together. But I think we have the intellectual mind, we have the heart, we also have the biological. So that scenario you were talking about with your friends and one guy, is that there's subconsciously a biological element that's going off to suddenly compete.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens the other way. If there was 5 guys and a woman, potentially as well. And it's something to be aware of, but it's not something you can control necessarily.
Think about that with just in terms of jobs, like, this idea, so many people are getting laid off.
Yeah.
There are seemingly only X amount of jobs out there, but a lot of people looking. How would you apply that same thinking to that scenario? Yeah,
the jobs are, if you focus on the layoffs, then you're going to be in a dark space, because it's like, The old guard is shedding jobs because the models that they've been using are no longer relevant. So if you are able to, you can either go, well, I'm going to keep looking and don't let that bother you. And you shouldn't. You should just keep looking anyway. But you can also take it as an opportunity to say, well, what can I do without like giving my power to a large corporate machine? What is my machine? What, because we're all little mini factories, but we don't often give ourselves the ability to be a factory, our own agency, our own ability. So if you were to like, as a thought experiment, think for a moment, like what if money, old exercise, but what if money was not an issue? And you had all the time in the world, what would you do? What would you truly focus on? That is probably the area that you would, look at this as an opportunity to then go after. Because if you got laid off, that means you have probably 2 months of severance or something. You have time, to take that, to really think for at least 2 days out of that 2 months, what is it that I really want to be doing? And you can make huge changes. And this is something I've been thinking about a lot too. And again, my wife and I often have these conversations, but a thing happens and you can say that this thing is really, it doesn't care about us. It has no consciousness. A thing happens, but our story around that changes its effect. If we take a negative story on it, then we're going to have negative experiences. If we look at it from a positive perspective, then there's value that's going to come out of that. So I have this theory that ultimately everything is stories, because we're talking in our heads all the time. We're projecting stories. We're telling stories about the future and what we wish the future would be in desire. And we desire for health, wealth, beauty, power, whatever it is. And then we're telling stories about where we came from and how something that happened to me a long time ago was unfair and it's still affecting me now.
Yeah.
And that happens. And what I realize as I've gone through life is that everybody has gone through tragedy. And you can either claim that as being your identity or you can let it go. And I'm going to give kudos to my wife, by the way. She's the one who I'm parroting, which I often find that half of my wisdom comes from her. But the thing is, you realize that you can tell a new story. And you can either tell a story of like, oh no, the world's falling apart. I don't have a job because I got laid off and I'm never going to find a job. Or you can do, famously, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but Thomas Edison once was having dinner with his family when he was, in New Jersey. And they had I believe, a Menlo Park laboratory that was enormous. And he was interrupted and said, oh, you got to come with me. And he went over to the top of a range and he saw his whole lab on fire. And this is all of his life work, just going up in flames. And he calmly looked at the guy and goes, oh, good, we can start over, as an opportunity. And then within like,
I really hope that happened.
Like within a year or so, he was back and even bigger and better. Yeah. So most people would have been crushed and like, oh, this is the end of it. So the question is like, how can I turn it into a better story? Like instead of like, oh no, I've gotten laid off. Oh, wow, I've got time to think. You know what I mean? You can switch it. And recently, we went through the wildfires.
Yeah.
In January. And there was a moment where my wife, daughter, and I were looking through the cameras and seeing the flames come up on our house. And at that point, we thought, okay, that's it. We've lost everything. And so many people did. And 15 days later, we go to our house and it's still standing. Houses around us are gone. And it was, kind of like being put in front of the firing line and not getting shot. So what is the lesson from that? Well, huge appreciation for what is versus what I don't have. An appreciation that I have a foundation from which to work. An appreciation that I have a healthy body, that my mind is still clear. And I think it's extremely important without going into like, gratitude. Maybe that's the reason why it works, but truly embodying that and going, what do I have? And how can I use that to do something extraordinary? And I think that's what we often do is we go from like, oh no, how am I going to survive? And what you should do is go, that's true, keep on to that. But how might I be extraordinary? Which means just being you. Being extraordinary doesn't mean like going out and aspiring to do something else. It's like being radically you is extraordinary. Just relaxing into you. And if you're radically you, I have found that things tend to open up.
My visa just got approved for to be, thanks,
Yeah,
to be an
congratulations.
extraordinary alien.
Yeah,
that's the
extraordinary alien.
Extraordinary alien. It's sort of about that. This idea of authenticity and being radically you.
Mm-hmm.
I know we touched on it earlier, but you talk about the gifts of tragedy, and I mentioned on here a couple of times about Tom dying.
Mm-hmm.
And when I tell people that, some people's reactions, I'm sorry. And I don't mean this in like a dismissive way, but I'm like, it was the greatest gift in so many ways. And the people who don't immediately rush to say I'm sorry, they've been through tragedy and they get it. And one of the gifts that happened for me is that I was actually able to be myself. I was able to discover who I was because I moved out here with somebody who was very close with, like any close relationship. And so there was always, I guess, maybe I would never have gone and be my wild and radical self because I would have had someone else's perception that maybe kept me a bit more constrained.
Yeah.
And what I found in that process was total liberation, 5,000 miles from where home was, pretty isolated, didn't really have anyone else left in life at that point. But in that place.
And the pandemic.
In the pandemic. So it was just isolation upon isolation. A lot of friends had exited, and there was a lot of pain around all that stuff. But actually, it gave me a complete blank slate to be, who am I? What do I like doing? And that was the first time I actually remember saying, I'm only going to go meet people, do exactly what I want to do, free from all these expectations of what I was supposed to be doing.
Right.
And so this idea of finding radical authenticity, I know a lot of it we talk about in, LA, this place in the world, is very common in wellness culture. But it's actually a really hard thing to find.
Yes.
But I think you do it. I think that's what spoke to me in your book. And I think that's what speaks to me in people that I've invited on here. There's something that I can't necessarily articulate other than they're being very truthful to who they are. Like the way that you communicate is truth to who you are. And that's magnetic.
Yeah, I think humans have a strong bullshit monitor, and they know, like, when you're at a typical industry party that people are talking to you and having a drink and then basically trying to suss you out.
Yeah.
And the undercurrent of it is like, who are you? Are you important? And can I benefit from you?
Can you give me something?
Yeah. And I think that's, well, number one, gross, but it is how humans behave, because everything comes down to survival, and can I prosper and survive? Are you an alpha? Can I connect to you? And that's unfortunate, but it's just the way humans are. Whereas I have found that when I'm mostly myself, things tend to work. When I start to crimp myself down to do something that's uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable in a good way, but uncomfortable because it goes against who I am, then it's a problem. And again, my wife has been coining a term, which I will give her credit to as well. She goes, go with the easy yes. And what she means by that is she always calls me Thor, because I'm always hammering through a problem, even though I don't want to take my own advice. And her point was like, you can get to success that way. And oftentimes I have, through just blunt force, give me the thing, but it never felt right. There's a thing you can do, and there's a thing that is calling to you to do. And the thing that's calling to you is generally an easy yes. At least that's what I've found. And it's hard, because the easy yes comes on its own time. Again, quoting my wife, she says things work out, but often not on your timeline. And the problem is when we put a timeline on, this is going to happen by this point, or I'm not going to be successful, or I'm not going to be able to survive. And this is something I struggle with. And I'm trying to learn how to let go a little bit more and allow things to just kind of settle in. But it's very difficult, because we're constantly being hit with like, oh, oh shitisms all the time, like, oh shit money, oh shit politics, oh shit the environment. So I'm trying to detox a bit from that. And writing is a really good way to do that, you know, because you oftentimes don't know what you think until you start to write it out. And you don't know what you want to do until you start to talk to friends about it. Yeah. And then have that opening. But the thing I admire about you, Holly, is that you take action. The primary thing you need to do to avoid the darkness and depression is to do something. You know, don't think more than 10 minutes out. What can I do now at this moment that will move things forward? And the thing that you do now for 10 minutes may not pay off for weeks, a month, further, right? Yeah. But you planted that seed.
It's thank you, firstly. It's that's the practice that I'm realizing now, is that I actually just can't control anything.
Yeah.
And then when you do brush up against hard stuff that happens in life, whether it's through death or tragedy or losing your house or whatever, you realize, like, there's actually none of this I can control.
No.
So the whole thing is the unknown, and that in itself is terrifying.
But you can control how you react and respond.
Yeah, I can. And I can do the next thing in the next 10 minutes.
Exactly. The common thing that we do is when something bad happens is we freak out, panic, freeze, you know, which is fine. Can't control that. It's a biological reaction. But you have to, like, then not associate with that reaction. Allow it to happen. Realize you can't do anything. If an earthquake happened right now, we could scream and yell, but that would do nothing.
What would we do?
Well, we should, you know, just calmly walk out of here. So that's, and kind of accept what's happening. There's a Buddhist concept that you can get hurt twice. Like if you're in a car accident, there's the impact, that's the pain. And then the second pain is going through, like, why this happened to me. This is going to screw up everything. I'm a loser, all that stuff. That's actually sometimes the worst pain. So if you can alleviate the second pain, which is your mind, again, telling stories, and focus on the fact that you had a fender bender, or focus on the fact that it's a radical acceptance of what is versus what you wish was. And then once you radically accept what is, I'm not saying you give up on your aspirations. You still have the mountain that you're trying to get to, but now you're just taking a detour. You know, it's not going to be a straight shot.
Yeah, and I think it's like finding that hope within what can feel like years of just steady progress and not losing your mind. Like even this, you know, talking about the Easy Yes, when the way that the studio arrived, and there was some financial, like, is this going to be an appropriate use of money, blah, blah, blah. But then it was just the whole scenario with people involved and everything was just like, yeah, do the thing. So I made the financial commitment, and then here I am doing these conversations, and I'm in my head trying to think about, but what happens next? How am I going to edit the whole thing, and how am I going to and it's, I catch myself getting into that spiral so quickly, and I have to meditate and come back and be like, everything's okay. Yeah. Kind of to the point of delusionally convincing myself that I'm okay.
Yeah, there's a way of dealing. I'm stealing from somebody's technique, I think, but whenever I get really concerned about something, I will write it down on a paper, and then I'll say, like, what is the percentage chance of this actually happening? You know, like, what is the percentage chance of me not being able to get a job? Or what is the percentage chance of me running out of money? Or what is the percentage chance of me not getting healthier? Whatever it is that's bothering you. And then if you can write down and look at it and put a percentage to it, you're like, oh, okay, I can handle that. It's a 60% chance of this could happen or not happen. And then your brain kind of goes, oh, okay. What makes us have anxiety, I think, is the fog of nervousness around an indistinct idea that we think might happen, which is about 5 layers deep in amber, you know, and we're like, this is bothering me. I'm not quite sure what it is. But if you can write it down and go, I'm concerned about how I'm going to edit this. Well, what are the chances that you're not going to be able to do it? Well, what's the solution to not being able to edit? Well, finding someone who knows how to edit.
Yeah.
Well, then if I find that person, how can I pay them? You don't. You say, can you do this as a favor? And I will actually, once I get financed, be able to pay you, for things going forward. I think your brain is a creative machine that just needs to be put into the right context. If you put a door up that's locked and go, problems behind the door, I don't want to deal with it, and it keeps knocking, and saying, let me out, open the door, shine a light in there and say, come out, embrace the problem, give it a form, and say, I'm going to deal with you. It's kind of a Zen stoicism.
It's as you're talking, because I know that, we'll wrap shortly, but you'll find the creative solution in all these things. Yeah. And for what I see a whole generation or a whole workforce right now of, I think people who are happy in their work and their finances right now is a minority.
Yes.
It's either people who are not working or people who are working and it's not enough money, or they're not satisfied in the work that they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, you're saying that the solution isn't, or I'm hearing, the solution isn't more money or the end result, but it's the thinking about, it's the creative solution in that process.
Yeah.
That there is available for everyone.
Yeah.
And what would happen if an entire workforce was suddenly treating all their troubles of money or work or relationships or whatever as this creative challenge?
In a way, everything is a design problem. Design is a problem-solving, practice. So if you can kind of step back from Holly or John and say, a person is going through this, what would be the creative solution for that person? It's almost like third-personing yourself and objectifying yourself. And if you do that, it gives you a bit of distance. All right, well, what does this person have on the plus ledger? Well, they're healthy, they're a certain age, they have a certain amount of experience. Oh, okay, that's good. What is it that they don't have and what do they need? It becomes very clear. So if you can kind of like turn it almost into a whiteboarding problem, your brain's happier because like, oh, I'm creatively thinking about this problem, which is me. I'm the thing that I'm solving. But secondly, you start to get a real sense of like, oh my gosh, I actually can do a lot of things. There's many things I can do. If you don't, then you're going to go, oh, the economy's bad, layoffs are happening, I'm screwed, which might be completely true, by the way, on some level, on one story angle. On the other story angle, what is it? Huge opportunity. Maybe it's an opportunity to like, well, maybe I'll go to Lisbon and live there. Maybe I'll, there could be any number. We're resistant to change. So what we're trying to do is preserve what is. And since we had a huge change in our life through economic impact, we're like, I can't keep the thing that I was doing before, which might be good, actually. So I think it's just, there's no one answer, but I do know that actively engaging your creative soul as an approach to creatively think about the problem is going to be much more interesting for you than laying back and going, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do?
We can only equip ourselves with the unknown.
Yeah. Everything's unknown.
Yeah.
The very fact that we're here,
Yeah.
the very fact that you and I, who were strangers a few years ago and met and now in Venice are here, and not to be too far back, but the very fact that your parents met, the very fact that mothers going back generations gave birth to people who then gave birth to people, and you exist here in this moment in time. And there's been like, I don't know, close to 100 billion people before us and there'll be many more after us, and you're here for this period of time is extraordinary. If you really think about how unusual an opportunity it is just to be here at all, then it doesn't matter what layoffs are happening, you are in a power position. And I think ultimately you have to realize that courage puts you into agency of yourself again. And if it's delusional, it's okay. And as a one quick anecdote, and there was a very famous father of modern psychiatry named William James. And I'm going to botch this a little bit, but basically, he came from a privileged family. He was at Harvard, but he was in his 20s and he had like a failed love, situation with his a woman that he was deeply in love with. He got sick. He went to Brazil, I believe, got malaria, came back, was a wreck at 27, and just thought, my life is just a mess. Health problems, couldn't keep anything together. So he wrote in his diaries, I'm going to take 100% responsibility for everything that happens in my life for 1 year. And if things have not gotten better in 1 year, I will unlife myself. So he did that, and almost immediately, within a month or so, his health problems started disappearing. His life got better, because what he did in his book it's called The Will to Believe, I believe. And he wasn't talking about religion. He was talking about the ability for our brain to then focus on things that are solutions versus what is going wrong. And if you could take 100% responsibility for when a car that your car gets keyed or whatever, like you end up like with a earthquake and your house falls, you take 100% responsibility for that, you are in control then. So again, the Edison example, instead of going, oh my God, why did this happen? It's like, okay, that happened, own it. What do we do next?
Yeah.
And I think that's the trick in these uncertain times, is that taking extreme responsibility and control for what's going on in our lives, especially the things we can't control.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of this goal of becoming master of the unknown.
Yeah.
That's my aspiration.
Well, you are. I mean, the very fact that you get up every day and you do the things you do, we're constantly stepping into the unknown. We think that we have control, but you don't. Every time you get into a car, what can happen? Every time you get, you step outside, anything can happen. So what that should do is not put you into an existential dread of life, but put you into like a state of constant awe that you are here to experience everything in this moment.
That was, that's what I keep returning to as it feels like life is, I'm sure you've had this feeling, Masmoka, for example, this idea that just life is converging. Mm-hmm. And I'm having that experience with work, with this, with music. And I was speaking to someone this morning, and I just caught myself, I'm saying like, I'm getting up and I'm doing the next thing, and I'm doing the next thing, and I'm making sure the clients are happy, and I'm making sure that I have, the person who's going to be in this chair next, and I'm making sure that I'm like working out, and making sure that I'm doing the thing. And I just realized I was forgetting the fun in the whole thing. And I go to breath work, and that was just the memo that came through. It was just like, joy. I could die tomorrow. And if I'm not appreciating the joy and the awe, but that's where the God piece comes from me, is it's the awe and the magic and the beauty and the joy of being alive, and holy shit.
Yeah. I don't use the word God just because I think it's been, used maybe in ways it shouldn't be. But I look at, the universe and life, and I think it's the same thing, but everything that you were mentioning that you were concerned about, again, are stories. These are stories like, oh my God, if I don't do this, then this will happen. You don't know that.
Yeah.
Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but, and I'm aspiring to be more present all the time. And, there's an old Zen saying that when you eat, when you sleep, and when you work. Don't contaminate these things. But because we're never totally just doing the thing that's in front of us, we're always worried about something else, which means our focus is no longer here. And then, you end up like missing out on life. What was it John Lennon said in his song, like, life is the thing that happens when you're busy making plans, and the reality is you need to be, I'll probably botch that quote, but you have to be here now, is really important. These are all, the wisdom of the ages is going to continue down to now because we're humans.
Yeah.
And even though we are worried about so many things right now, like, the technology and the world, overall, we're doing okay.
Yeah.
We don't have people dying in childbirth. We don't have bubonic plague. We don't have an average lifespan of 28. We have a cure for polio. We have food more, even though we have too many people who are growing hungry. But overall, the world is in better shape, and we forget that. We forget the fact that humans have historically been killing each other with impunity, forever. So the trick is, yes, I'm not downplaying all the problems in the world, but I think that we don't upplay so many things which are extraordinary. And again, going back to that moment of awe, I'm not saying like don't look at, close your eyes to the homeless problems and disease problems and all that. I'm just saying give that equal weight to the extraordinary things that are happening in your life. And I think if you do that, automatically more opportunities open up for you because you're seeing them. You're not reducing the aperture down to like, oh no, oh no. It's more like, okay, here's oh no, but then here's oh yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I'm seeing them. I see a lot more.
Yeah. I mean, it's trying to drop your ego as much as possible because the ego is a thing that is always worried about how we are, how we look, how we sound. We are what we are. It's a privilege we have a body. And I think if you kind of focus on that, because, as I get older, my hair is going to turn grayer. I'm going to start bending a little bit more probably, whatever the case is, I'm not going to try to pretend it's not happening, but radically realize like what a privilege it is for me to have gone through the stages of childhood, teenage, 20s, 30s, 40s to where I'm going, 50s,
and beyond.
So, I'm lucky that I got this far.
Thank you.
Thank you.